Speaking of like there being so many great generative artists out there, I've noticed like an insane explosion of people using ChatGPT to use P5JS and create like now even more people are generative artists, and it's cool that it's just opened up to a whole wide new world of creators, I guess.
Two Bored Apes talking NFTs, DeFi, and some random stuff. Two Bored Apes talking NFTs, DeFi, and some random stuff.
Welcome to episode 73 of Two Bored Apes. I'm your host, Jamie. I'm here with my friend and co-host, Roy. Roy, how are you?
Doing pretty well, Jamie. I'm doing pretty well. I had a large meal about 4 to 5 hours ago, so I'm pretty full, but I'm not crazy full. We're back to talking about food first things, but I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm also doing pretty well. We almost canceled this recording twice. First, because I slept through it, and then second, because seemingly you were going to be in a food-induced coma for the backup time that we picked.
But we made it.
We're here. Yep. Look at us. Professional podcasters.
It's hard to imagine less professional podcasters, especially for
my favorite podcast in the whole world is clearly less professional than this, right?
I don't know about that.
There's been times, certainly, when it has been.
Yes.
They've had many shit show aspects. Anyway, let's get into it, okay? Ready? The segment we like to start this podcast with is called News of the Week.
News of the Week.
And right at the top here, it says latest chess results.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, we played another chess game before this week's recording, like we did last week. And unfortunately, Roy won this week.
I would not say unfortunately. I would say,
you'd say fortunately.
Order has been restored.
Order was restored last time because the white pieces won, right? The white pieces have won both times. White has a slight advantage in chess, and both times they've won. So now, if you're looking at the latest two games of chess, we're completely even chess players, you know? We're equally matched, and we're both just able to squeeze out the win with the advantage of having the white piece.
I mean, if that's actually true, that's amazing. Like, I would love that because...
That is amazing. It doesn't seem like that's the case, though, because we're both still too bad for us to be down to that small of a margin.
Very true.
It took me a lot longer before I completely blundered a bishop than I did last game, but I guess there was too much.
So, listen, something happened during the game that made me laugh a lot. Jamie, there was we had like a 5-minute timer, and at one point, Jamie spends
about 7 moves into the game.
Yeah, Jamie just starts. He's sitting back like this, just looking at the chessboard, kind of like not doing much. And I'm like, "Do you know it's your turn?" And he's like, "No, I'm thinking about my." And I did not even. We played 100 games. I've never seen Jamie think or like plan that long for moves ahead. Normally, you just click a piece and here goes. This goes.
Yeah.
Good. Or like,
I'm
especially
very impulsive in chess for sure.
Especially like there have been times where you've obviously taken the time to think, but it's always been reactive where you've lost a big piece, you've blundered, or I've done something like, oh, wow, this was just like 7 moves in. Just the board no pieces were under attack. And you were just like, I'm going to actually think about what I'm going to do. It's just like,
I had got my opening setup going, but I wasn't exactly sure how to start the mid game. And anyway, this is an NFT podcast. We got the chess preamble out of the way. We got the food preamble out of the way. What else is there to talk about?
I mean, there's so much preamble to talk about. We could go off in many directions.
Let's talk about OpenSea Pro, which is sort of their rebranding of Gem, is it? Which they purchased a while ago.
Yeah. They bought
they're obviously concerned about Blur, who's very successfully taken a lot of market share from them. And this seems to be their sort of counter move.
They bought Gem about a year ago.
For the listeners that don't know, what was Gem?
So Gem was one of the first marketplace aggregators. So it was a platform like back in the olden days, a year ago, or like maybe just over a year ago. There were a few NFT marketplaces, OpenSea, LooksRare, X2Y2, with like the big ones back then. And if you wanted to buy or sell an NFT, you'd pick your marketplace, or you'd go to each marketplace individually to list your NFT or to check if there's one for sale on these respective marketplaces. And then, as you would expect, people developed aggregators. So instead of having to go to all the different marketplaces, you just go to one place and you could view the liquidity across multiple places. I believe Genie.xyz might have been the first one, but then Gem came along not too long after, and it was clearly better. And so a lot of people loved it. I loved it. I use it a lot. And then OpenSea bought it, and then SudoSwap came along, and they were like a no royalty marketplace. And that was like, that threw a cog in the works. And then Blur came along, and that threw another cog in the works. And
Spanner, don't you say Spanner?
That's correct. I think both work. Cog in the works, Spanner in the works.
When I said you, I meant specifically like Australians use the word Spanner, because I remember you first saying it, and I go, that's not what we say.
I'm such a bad Australian. I don't know if that's.
And a spanner is like a wrench to you, a thing that you would tighten a bolt with.
Yes.
Yeah, so we don't call those spanners.
You call them wrenches.
Correct. We call wrenches wrenches. You know what's funny? I've taught a couple Americans about how we just made up the word aluminum, and they're all just like, well, why are these idiots elsewhere adding extra syllables? I'm like, they're not adding extra. We just took one away.
Yeah, that's the most egregious one. I don't know if we've spoken about this in the podcast or not, but I found out that enroll is a word that's spelt differently in America.
Oh, I think we did talk about that one. You guys only use one L.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's fucked up. Anyway, you were talking about Gem and stuff. Actually, well, I did want to interrupt 1 second, but I'm trying to be better about that, so I didn't. But you were saying, sometimes you would pick your marketplace or go to multiple, right? And one of the things, almost all of our listeners probably know this, but just to reiterate, the reason that sort of something like that is possible, right? If I were to put an item for sale on Craigslist and eBay, there's no way for those two to really talk to each other, to where if it gets sold on one, it's automatically not up for sale on the other one. And so you can have issues there where, you make a deal here, but then you get a better offer here, or, that kind of thing, right? But these are all just sovereign assets that individuals own, that everybody in the world with access to the internet can see who owns it and all of that, and blah, blah, blah. And so that's just a reason why, it's sort of, in a way, easier for multiple markets to proliferate in the system, because the data is all, public and stuff. There's nothing necessarily proprietary in a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's like the beautiful part of these permissionless, interoperable Legos and building blocks. That's what the whole blockchain is for and about, and we're seeing it play out that way, where people just build protocols. And we're like, hey, you can come and just buy any NFT from anywhere because they're listed on public blockchains, and we just find those listings and put them all in one place for you.
It is so disappointing. I mean, not to get super sidetracked into the royalties thing, though, that the degree to which the market forces, I guess is maybe the fairest way to say it, have deemed them as just a secondary thing that can be tossed aside, where it seemed so fundamental to what made the space interesting for artists initially, but then also really all these very native Web3 things like Bored Ape Yacht Club, etc. It was such a huge part of the business model of all of them. And now just basically to make trading easier and more profitable, it's all been tossed aside. And sort of the talking points is just that, well, it's not something that you can have on chain, and so it has to go, which is, there's an element of truth to it, but the amount of things that is probably true for that haven't been tossed aside, that aren't necessarily the good selling points of what makes NFT superior and less beholden to gatekeepers, that it hasn't necessarily been tossed aside the way royalties have lately.
Do you have like examples of other things? Because I'm struggling to think of any.
Well, like just as a, for instance, early on when this kind of thing started, you had these marketplaces going, well, we're giving up the creator royalties, but we're not giving up our marketplace royalties. Yeah. That was like a very early concrete instance that I can come up with right now.
That was mind blowing when marketplaces did that, and they got away with it for a while.
It wasn't mind blowing at all, but also like mind blowing. You know what I mean? In the way that when you see politicians be hypocritical, it's like it's mind blowing, but not at all mind blowing at the same time.
Yeah. All right, so Gem, OpenSea bought Gem, and then it existed for a while. It started to like decrease in volume. I think after Blur came out, most people went over to Blur for their like aggregating needs. And now OpenSea's relaunched it as OpenSea Pro. And I think like it's only been a couple of days. It seems like the volume is way up over there. Obviously, they added a whole bunch of features. I haven't used it much myself. I poked around for just a few minutes, but I'm hearing pretty decent feedback. What about you?
I looked at the email briefly and didn't look too deep into it. I think the one quick thing that I saw was that they're sort of trying to, so Blur, largely what they're doing is incentivizing people with the Blur token. And it seems like OpenSea Pro, is trying to incentivize people with some sort of NFT, which is a little bit more, I don't know. It's interesting because it's more consistent or whatever with what the marketplace is, but also something that is, in theory, less able to be, valued or taken into account as a financial reward, so to speak, for incentivization in the way that a fungible token can.
Yeah, it's a really interesting move. Because
did you see? I sent this into the group chat. Somebody accidentally fat fingered and spent 100 ETH on one when I guess the collection floor was 0.04. So I don't. Maybe they were trying to put in 0.01 and somehow did. I've definitely had issues where I'm trying to do point something and the interface of the program assumes unless you hit 0 point that you're talking about a whole number. So I can sort of see how that happened. Yeah, I actually did fuck it up once on NFTFi where I gave somebody 3.5 ETH on an NFT that was worth 0.7. I was trying to do basically my standard half floor offer. So I was trying to do 0.35, gave them 3.5. Of course they defaulted. Son of a bitch. But that's but at least it wasn't 100 ETH when I was trying to do I guess 0.01, I assume.
Yeah. I saw that. That sucks for that person. I don't know if it was like a direct sale, a listing, or like a bid that they put out.
I mean, I had the transaction hash in the thing I sent, but it was just, it was funny enough to see I didn't need to look too deep into it. Also maybe, this is not interesting enough to say, but I'm going to say it. Maybe it was like a rare one and they were trying to offer 0.1 instead of 0.01.
Maybe.
That's besides the point.
Yeah.
So that's OpenSea Pro. We'll know more about it in the future and see how successful it is.
Next week we'll probably have more of an update and certainly
it seems like
future
they're doing some more sort of. It's just, again, we've talked before about the idea that it seems like there's going to be very much a race to zero fees, and this seems to be another part of it because I think somewhere in the email I saw something about them incentivizing, or saying it's going to cost less to list, blah, 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 that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. Like marketplace wars rage on, basically. Have we spoken much about art blocks and their marketplace? I know we said it was like coming, but
we definitely talked about it a little bit when it was first sort of being spoken about and Snowfro was kind of giving hints and stuff, but I don't think we've really talked about it late. I mean, we only recorded one episode in the last 7 weeks, so no, we have not talked about it lately.
I mean, I would be really curious to know what percentage volume of Artblocks pieces are now being sold via the Artblocks native marketplace versus OpenSea and Sansa and some of the other marketplaces. Because
it is a little bit strange because the nature of the way that these things, like we were saying before, it's all sort of vaguely open sourcey, blah blah blah. Like a lot of these marketplaces. Like if you go to Blur, for instance, and you go to list it, it's like, do you want to also list it on OpenSea and Looks Rare at the same time? And I vaguely remember something about the Art Blocks one, theirs being like, it's the OpenSea contract, but they're forcing you to keep the royalty rather than giving you the option or something to that effect where, these marketplaces that are separate are not quite as separate as they seem to be just because, again, there's nothing all that proprietary about being a smart contract in between a buyer and a seller.
I just tried to look up on Dune Analytics. Purple Hat created this dashboard. There's like 10 different charts. The gist of it is it seems like significantly fewer royalties are being paid as of a couple months back. Which...
No surprise there.
Yeah. I guess I think that was after OpenSea went fully royalty, because like Art Blocks was not tradable on Blur or like any of the other marketplaces.
It still
really
isn't.
Yeah, because of how the smart contracts are. So OpenSea being the default place people buy them meant that royalties were enforced. But I think now OpenSea has sort of flip-flopped and they went to optional royalties across the board, and Art Blocks obviously took a hit.
Yeah, it is such a wild thing to see. Like, the space was getting so heated, right? I mean, if you look at 2 years ago, the level of excitement and stuff, and there was definitely, possibly us on this podcast, but other, people in places talking about the potential for, things like races to the bottom in fees and stuff like that. I think we personally foresaw that in the marketplaces more so than we saw the creator royalties getting, eaten away the way that they have been. Yeah. But when you look at the degree to which, again, all the big NFT projects, but also now like the marketplaces like OpenSea had this idea in their head and this, at the time, current and back data of how the market worked and what their position in it was and how much they could sort of scrape from all of the transactions. It's just everything in the space almost, except for the individual traders, right, had been built around a structure that no longer exists. And so, we talked about, for sort of other reasons, but partially this, I guess, the amount of projects that existed that we thought were going to just have to over time slowly fade and fail. But now you look at, the biggest and most successful ones, and specifically, as I've been saying this, I'm thinking of, OpenSea for the marketplace and then Bored Ape Yacht Club for the actual NFT ecosystems. It's so tough because even though they have, a nice runway and a big enough name and blah, 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 to continue to have some level of success, the amount of money that investors put in at the certain valuations, the level of success that they can perhaps continue to sustain is not what they and their investors were necessarily expecting. So it's just it's a tough position to be in.
Yeah, and we're seeing it across the board. I mean, just the bear market is brutal in so many different ways, and this is just yet another way that it's hurting people, projects, creators, etc. Anything else you wanted to say about OpenSea Pro?
I mean, I unfortunately I have not looked into it enough to be able to say more than we've already said.
I guess
if it's very new, though, we can say that, right? It's like 3 days old right now.
If you've ever used Gem on any wallet, go to OpenSea, the front page, I think it is. You can go mint your free NFT. It's a free mint, and it's like 0.04 to 0.06, I think, last I checked.
And don't accidentally spend 100 ETH trying to buy another one.
Yeah.
That's an official recommendation. We say at the beginning of the podcast, there's no financial advice on this podcast, but if there was, that would be one, right? Never spend 100 ETH on an NFT whose floor price is 0.04. Don't accidentally do that. That's a pretty sound financial decision. It's not financial advice, but it is a sound financial decision to not do that. Well, we can touch on the one thing that's listed here in between chess results in OpenSea Pro. William Mapan, artist of Dragons and Anticyclones, I think pretty clearly are his two most famous works. One an FX Hash project, initially Dragons, and then one later, Anticyclones, an Art Blocks project. Sold the one of one, or I guess maybe not. Look, because I think I saw a WEF offer. Was it something that somebody else had bought and they resold for 75F, or was it directly from William?
I think it was a resale.
Yeah, the tweet I read made it seem like that, but it wasn't specifically clear. And again, I did not know this until I saw you wrote this up in our show notes. So I just looked it up quickly to look at it. It looks very much almost like, and I don't mean this negatively, but like a crayon type drawing from a kid. Mm-hmm. The way the coloring in is done, it's very much got, and this is a thing that a lot of generative artists like to do, and generative art appreciators like to appreciate, including me, is to try and get that very much traditional art feel and looks, and trying to recreate natural looking brush strokes, for instance. Mm-hmm. This one particular to me looks more like a crayon.
it is not that common that you see sort of a generative artist selling a one of ones, especially for this high of a price. Obviously, William is.
There's very few buyers, right? There's like 6529 will do that, and just honestly, like 2 or 3 other people, and like, you know, one of those is in bankruptcy proceedings now and having to sell all of their NFTs, right? There's very, very few people that are willing to spend that amount of money on a non-major project generative art piece.
And I mean, that was pretty true even during the bull run. And now we're in the depths of this crazy crypto NFT winter. And so like
crypto,
NFT winter
in some sense
doing pretty well.
Right, yeah, they've been kind of rallying.
Big sale, 75 ETH. Kind of talking about crypto rallying segues us into one of the other topics. Dogecoin surges 20. I think it went up like 30% because Elon changed the Twitter logo. I don't know if it still is the Twitter logo is still a Doge, but
is that true?
You uninstalled Twitter.
I'm off Twitter for a week and a half or something at this point. I just want to go back to the Golden Ape thing for 1 second. It is interesting comparing this to the bull market, right? We had ringers selling for 3,900 ETH or something like that, and now we have a 75 ETH sale on our list. Whereas we used to have probably 3 or 4 Fidenza sales daily that were for that. And again, there's a difference between one of one generative pieces versus the ones in the big collections, but still.
I remember the first 1,000 ETH Fidenza sale. What a time!
I remember the first 100 ETH one more than I do that.
What a crazy time 2021 was.
It really was insane.
Not only were things selling for this amount in ETH, but ETH was like 4K. Yeah.
And just to put a obvious spin on it, right? Not only were things selling for this, but like things were being bought for this, right? There was a buyer on the end of all of these sales saying, yes, I want that for that price. Maybe in this current environment, it makes tons of sense to go, somebody would sell that for that. Of course you'd sell it. But the reason they were selling it is because there was a buyer on the other end of the trade.
Yeah. There were so many times where an Uplox floor would 8x from morning to night. And
it was very crazy 2.5 months or whatever.
Yeah. The good old days.
I didn't hear about the Dogecoin. I didn't see that he replaced the bird logo. That seems insane.
Yeah, it's still there. I just checked. So instead of the bird it's just a Doge.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
That is fucking crazy.
Let me share my screen just so you can see it. Another thing he did is he tweeted one of the images from 6529's collection, the memes by 6529. It's one of the Seize the Memes of Production memes. And he just tweeted it. And then obviously the floor of that specific NFT went from like 1 ETH to 8 ETH and then back down in the course of 12 hours.
That was so exciting when I found out I had that Sergeant Pepe one from that collection. I don't know if I actually got to talk about that on this podcast. I probably did it because it feels like it was more than the 7 weeks ago or whatever when we were recording, and it was a big enough thing for me.
But yeah, Elon changed the Twitter logo to a Doge. Doge pumped. Doge came back down as is wont to do.
I do remember a while ago, probably, I had to guess like a year ago at this point or whatever, when he was sort of like taking it seriously. He's like, what we need to do with Doge is like, we're just going to, 10x the amount of transactions we can do per unit. And it's just like completely ignoring the trilemma, just thinking of it as a very centralized thing that we can just make more. It's like you are so out of your depth, but it doesn't matter because you have money and followers. You can just say whatever the fuck you want to. And people will eat it up, even though the people that know about this particular thing know you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, like, as soon as he did this, there was all this speculation about, is Doge going to be like this payment settlement coin for Twitter and all this? Like, it still could be, but it just seems so.
For sure, it could be. It also, well, we don't need to get into the degree to which Twitter seems to not be succeeding financially anymore. They never sort of were. They were kind of, they had tons of users, tons of engagement, and were helping. It just got very dark in your room all of a sudden.
I guess it didn't happen last week, but we have a ghost in our house here in Dubai.
Oh, that's too bad.
Where I finally get, like, I very clearly get why people throughout history, especially during eras where there's been electricity, will think there are ghosts. Because the wiring is the wiring is just off in our apartment. And so the lights will just turn on and off of their own volition. The other day, like we woke up and the air conditioning had just turned off in the middle of the night. It was nothing broken. We just turned it back on, but it had just its own.
This must be a friendly ghost because I did not detect the slightest bit of fear in you when the lights went out. You were totally fine with it.
Many a time. The most annoying thing this ghost does is it tampers with our washing machine. So almost always you put on a load of washing and it just keeps running forever. It'll get down to 1 minute and just sit there. So you have to go manually and like switch it to like the drain cycle and then the spin cycle and then
that is a fucking pain. Just get a new one, right?
Well, we think it's the electricity, not the washing machine. Because it is literally a brand new washing machine that we bought.
I guess fix the electricity then, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
You're always bragging about how easy it is to get like Diet Cokes delivered over there in Dubai or whatever. Get an electrician delivered. There you go.
Yeah, I probably should do that. Where were we?
We were talking about the Doge thing and how Twitter seemed to be not doing that well, but I didn't want to get sidetracked on that. Now, what the hell is a vessel, by the way? I somehow don't know what a vessel is.
I only barely know what a vessel is. So,
all right, so let's just go back one half of one step. The next thing we have written here is coda decoupling and vessel claim is live. Coda decoupling, I totally know what that is. I know what a coda is. I even had one for a hot second. And I knew that decoupling was coming. We can talk about that in a minute. But tell me what you do know about vessels so I can get at least caught up to where you are.
So last week we were talking about how Yuga announced their 2D strategy game, Legends of Mara, I think, or Mora. And basically the way to get assets for that game, characters, is via other side deeds. I think you even burn them. You burn an other side and you get a vessel or something like that. I don't know 100%. Okay. But basically, vessels are the, I guess, like NFT entry point into this 2D Legends of Mara game.
Quick question, if you know, is the Legend of Mara game a game that is purported to just exist indefinitely, or is it like a time thing like the Apes versus Mutants thing? Because I saw on YouTube, I was wasting time on YouTube earlier, and I think I saw like a headline for a video about, is this a scam or whatever, 2,900 for Yuga's new something about a game that only lasts 3 weeks or something like that. Is that related to this, or do you know?
I honestly don't know. My understanding was that it was more permanent, especially if they're like, I mean, who knows actually?
Yeah, asking you to burn a whole other deed, but the prices sort of line up with what that seemed to be. But they could also be, willfully misinterpreting it and stuff, which happens.
But yeah, so that happened. All right, to pick up where the second trip left off, it's time to introduce. Oh no!
I did also actually see in like their announcement, it said there's no deadline or whatever for doing these things, which would seem to indicate that if there's a game connected to it, the game also will last, an indefinite amount of time, because there's no point in having decoupling be active in 6 months if the game is only live for 3 weeks.
Yeah, that is correct. It doesn't look like there's any end date. Mara starts with the vessels. So there's 3 types of vessels: enchanters, farmers, and hunters.
Sounds kind of interesting already.
The claim period, which begins in early April, each other deed holder can claim 1 vessel, each with 1 of 3 random functions: hunter, farming, or enchanting. Each vessel has a specific incubation period before revealing a Mara. I guess I should claim my vessels. Claimed vessels will be sent to the other deed holding wallet as a separate ERC 721. Okay. So the vessels are in a new smart contract. This is repeating stuff again. Coders come into play. It seems pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. Just while you go ahead.
The game allows players to evolve their Mara into Coda Mara, farm sediment, and defend their other deed from emerging threats. With its engaging interactive platform, Legends of the Mara showcases the potential of NFTs and blockchain technology.
I love a good strategy game. I would love it if we actually had a Web3 native one that was good enough for me to want to play actively.
Do you have another deed?
Not anymore, no. I have no other deeds. I had 3. I had the one that was the, Genesis land or whatever, so to speak. And then I had the Coda one, and then I had the Mutant one. So they were all sort of nicely above floor, especially the Coda one, man. I mean, I managed to sell that for 34, like, day of or whatever, which is so sweet.
And I remember
and didn't put her into stables and got screwed on taxes and depreciation and all that good stuff. But whatever.
I remember like in the hours and maybe 1 or 2 days after that, you were kind of like, oh my God, did I make a big mistake? Are these coders going to be worth
and because it had a weapon, so it wasn't necessarily a floor coda. And
basically, I've thought about that a bunch because it is so easy in hindsight to be like, oh yeah, that was the top. Oh, we should have sold more back then. But in the moment, even when someone like you does sell something, they're like, well, this is crazy, it's gone up. There's still the doubt in the second. So it's like, it's so difficult to actually sell.
Yeah. I also remember when I very successfully sold I believe it was a summer fragment a long time ago for like 32 or something like that. I was like, I know for sure I just made a huge mistake, but I have to do it. And it's like the floor is now 2 or something.
Yeah.
You know?
What a great collection that is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still love it, and I still have my full set plus 1 extra winter. I can get rid of my extra winter, but the full set, I'm keeping that one for good. I have been sadly doing a bit of forced selling lately on various art blocks projects that I don't really love to the degree that I love all the ones that I'm keeping, but frags certainly will never fall into that category.
Nice. I'm doing some art blocks. I've been doing selling for like 6-8 months now, slowly but surely. I remember like episode 3 or 2, maybe even 1 of this podcast, I was like, I'm done. I'm sick of it.
Episode 2, you started by saying I'm burnt out on NFTs right now.
If only I sold my entire collection then. Yeah.
We would have had a lot less to talk about, but you'd have more money. All right, what's next here? We got Solar Transits by Robert Hodgin, who is the artist that did Ancient Courses of Fictional Rivers and Latent Spirits. Latent Spirits, that doesn't ring a bell to me.
Yeah, it's I think their second Art Blocks project. So Solar Transits is the next Art Blocks curated, coming out by Robert Hodgin, and they've done one other curated collection, Ancient Courses of Fictional Rivers, and Latent Spirits would have been Playground or Factory Presents.
Yeah, I'm looking at a Latent Spirits right now. My first one ever, I think. I don't remember this collection.
Solar I liked the Ancient Courses of Fictional Rivers quite a lot. I think more than most. I liked the topography.
I feel like I like each individual output of it, but the degree to which the collection is similar makes it not all that interesting of a collection to me. But if I look at any one thing, I go, that's an interesting idea and a pleasant looking output.
Especially for a collection, that one is 1,000 pieces. You know, there was a period of like 4 to 8 months, I can't remember, where like literally every Art Blocks project was just
they're all 1,000
because they would insta sell out.
And that was a very reasonable decision at the time, you know, at least from Art Blocks' perspective. But if you look at it from a curated perspective, a couple of those collections probably didn't have the diversity to necessarily support that. And they've definitely sort of admitted as such and said, we're going to be more open to having just varying sizes, edition sizes of our upcoming collections. And they've followed through on that.
This Solar Transits is 400 pieces, which I think is a pretty sensible size for most collections. I love it. Like I hadn't even had a chance to look through it until 10 minutes before our recording, but I spent that 10 minutes. I looked through it. I looked through the Robert's website where he sort of explains through the inspiration of it and like the mythology and methodology, and it's great. I've been out of the Art Blocks sphere more than I would care to like over the last few months, but I think this is going to bring me back in.
Yeah, I was just actually looking at the previous collection before that. Cargo was by an artist who has popular, an FX hash project called Reading a Book or Reading the Book, I think, something to that effect, that I have a piece of and quite like. Interesting collection. It's also one of those ones, it reminds me more of the FX hash aesthetic, if I can go so far as to say something like that, compared to Art Blocks, to where it's very much leaning into the fact that it's digital. You know, earlier we were talking about William Mappan's thing and how a lot of
are you talking about Cargo or?
I'm talking about Cargo right now, yeah. But also Reading the Book, the FX hash collection by him. But I was talking in the William Mappan thing that there's a lot of effort in some generative art to try and recreate the images of or parts of the images, right, of traditional art, which is very interesting and can look great. But then there's also these collections where they're leaning very hard into the fact that this is a digital collection of digital art, and it's supposed to look digital. And Cargo is very much that, as is, I would say, on average, more of the FX hash stuff than the art block stuff, including this particular artist's previous big collection over there called Reading a Book. I'm going to look up the exact name so I don't keep just
I think it
vaguely
might be
saying. It's very close to that, at the very least.
Yeah,
Reading a Book.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
Reading a Book it is, yeah.
Yep. And they have 5 collections on FX Hash. Reading a Book being their original, and I believe also their most financially successful. Also, their biggest. It has 1,000 editions, whereas all their other ones are, 130 to 320.
I know I have some. I have 2, 3, 4. I have 12 Reading a Books. I knew I liked them when I got them over a year. Well, maybe that's not correct. Over a year ago. And I
got mine March 10th of last year, so just over a year ago for me.
Yeah,
I have exactly one. Yeah,
and unfortunately missed Cargo. I saw them when they were like 0.3, 0.4, and I was like, these look really cool. Maybe it's about time to start buying some art blocks again. And then the next day they were like 1.5 ETH, and I was like, well.
Yeah. So just to catch the listeners up a little bit, we're probably not going to be able to dive too deep into any of these right now. But since we last talked to you, and I don't mean the previous episode, I mean the one 8 weeks ago, I guess at this point, 2 episodes ago, there's been 1, 2, 3 other art blocks curated collections: Cerebellum, Kalian, and Ceramics. So we had talked about Wavyscapes, which was the previous one, and now we're talking about Cargo and Solar Transits. But we did miss out on 3 that we never got to talk about, and we'll probably talk about them some as we go on. But
yeah,
that's just a little catching up on what transpired over there while we were gone.
Let's go back to Solar Transits, because it's releasing April 12th, which is next Wednesday, I believe. Starting price at 6 ETH, resting price at 0.2. It is astrophotography. Solar Transit is a procedural exploration of the origins of astrophotography. You were saying before we started recording that you've been looking for you were looking for astrophotography NFTs.
A while ago I was, because I'm very into space, and I had very little in the way of photography NFTs. So I thought that might be an interesting, way for me to kind of cross off 2 of those things at once, so to speak. It's
like the best. Well, I was going to say the best of 3 worlds.
Yeah, and then getting to add generative art on top of it here. There is something different, obviously, about the idea of, something that's trying to be evocative of astrophotography and the actual real thing, right? There's obviously, in my mind at least, value to both, but it is a different thing. So it's sort of scratching the itch without actually doing the real thing in a way. Just while we're on the subject, though, there is a popular FX hash collection that I have at least one piece of that this kind of reminds me of quite a bit. Does that ring a bell to you? I'm going to find it in my collection.
It does. This collection, Solar Transits, the inspiration came in 2012 when Robert went to Minneapolis to attend a festival, and basically Venus was in transit and went sort of in front of the sun from the perspective of Earth. And it's a very rare thing to happen to have a planet like align. There's
just a lot of space out there for it to be directly in front of the sun.
Yes.
When you look at how big the sky is, the sun is only this. So to also have Venus it's rare.
Yeah, it's rare. But it happened. The next time that's going to happen is in like 140 years or something like that. But anyway, he just thought it was really cool and just sort of made him want to explore this sort of idea and medium for creating art further.
Adrift is the name of the collection I was thinking of.
It sounds so familiar.
By MRKSWCZ, Jacek Markusiewicz. Probably didn't do a great job with that last name, but I'm trying.
Yes. I have 2 of those, which I think I got from having a tender pass thing.
Yeah, so that's a nice looking collection that is, appreciably different from this, in that these are all sort of giving you I would say, a view of 20% of the surface of a single planet in space, whereas solar transits is doing a little bit of a different thing in terms of the scope of what they're showing you, but definitely evocative, right, of the same natural space-oriented imagery.
Yeah. I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. I might try and mint some next week. How about you? You've been also abstaining.
Well, I sort of did a good amount of this, maybe, let me think, in the July-ish region of last year, where I was kind of doing a lot of wholesale selling of NFTs that I was no longer all that interested in, and kind of redirecting into stuff that I was more interested in. So I'm probably going to be doing that again. Right now, I'm sort of in the cleaning out phase. I just, as listeners will probably remember, a couple months back, I did a huge amount of the buying of the stuff that I was interested in on FX Hash. And now I'm sort of doing the other half where I'm kind of cleaning up the other stuff. Also, I had talked about trying to figure out what my tax bill was, all of that. I got the official number and I had sold a lot in anticipation of it. It turned out I needed to sell even more. And so I've been kind of working on that.
I will vamp for another moment while Jamie is looking for the thing that it reminded him of.
Michael Kozlowski, the MP Koz, a guy whose work I've liked a lot. He had a collection that came out while I was sort of in that full, like, oh shit, I got to just keep selling stuff. And unfortunately, the collection had at the time done well where I couldn't consider it. But now that things are a little bit more bearish, I can probably go back and look and maybe pick one up. Metropolis, it was called. Metropolis. I couldn't think of it, but
what's the name of that collection?
Bright Moments.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. What's the name of the collection that had that interesting auction mechanic and then you got printed?
Tectonics.
Tectonics. They're great.
Yeah.
They're really great.
They are. Good, very good variety in that collection too, which I like to see.
Do you remember what they were like minting out for?
Yeah, it was pretty consistent around 3. Someone lower, someone higher, but around 3 was sort of average. So.
Speaking of like there being so many great generative artists out there, I've noticed like an insane explosion of people using ChatGPT to use P5JS and create like now even more people are generative artists, and it's cool that it's just opened up to a whole wide new world of creators, I guess. Yeah, actually, this might be a fun way for us to transition into our probably weekly chat about AI that's going to just continue to happen on a podcast these days. But I was thinking about, we've talked about AI a lot in this podcast and the degree to which it's usurps humanity in so many ways and all this stuff. But at least at this point, one of the things I was thinking was that AI right now is very good and possibly getting better at, it makes inferences, right? It takes human data, human information, or information that humans have collected and assembled, right? And then can sort of infer from that. But in some sort of way, one of the ways that we can possibly look at ourselves in a positive light, in a growing future where AI is taking more and more of tasks that we said were things that made us human, right? And it sounds kind of sad and subservient in a way, but is to just get more data to put into the data sets for these AIs that are running so much of the stuff, right? Is because the AI, for the most part, it can't go out and stare at ants and figure out any shit about ants, right? It can look at all the information that humans have collected about ants and kind of boil it down and all this stuff for you. But in terms of actually going out and getting information about whatever, it can't do archaeology and find out anything about that shit, right? It can know what we know about archaeology, but it can't do new stuff of that. And so that's sort of possibly an increasing way to think about what maybe the use case of humanity is in a time when AI is going to be doing so much of the stuff that we used to do and think of as the use case for humans, right? The future is bright, everyone. We can go stare at ants now.
We're doing data. Well, I mean, if you're into biology, it's kind of interesting. I'm reading a book about ants right now, which is why that came to mind. But, just in terms of if we have this idea of AI that I very much sort of believe is that if you have enough computing power and you have enough data and you have a proper algorithm laid on top of the data and you use the processing power, you get this magical stuff, right? And sort of that old Asimov quote or whatever about how any sufficiently complicated technology looks like magic, right? That's sort of what you get when you have big data, a good algorithm, and big computing power. But the data down here, right, we can still provide new and more data to it that does not currently exist. That is something that's still very much or somewhat, right, purely in the domain of the humans that the AI has not taken yet. And that, if we're hopefully we're not in a terrible dystopian where the AI is terrible and only leads to ruin, but in one where it helps humanity, which we to some degree believe because, it's still to be determined, right? There are scenarios where it'll be good. There's scenarios where it'll be bad. There's stuff in the middle. But in terms of what we can do, and also to, because if it's not determined yet that it's going to be good, bad, or in between, the data that we feed into it will have some sort of effect on which way this goes, right? Because there's the three things as far as I can tell. The computing power is neutral, right? There's just more or less of it. But the data and the algorithm are both things that, you have that, the concept GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out. But in terms of what the output is, the computing power is only letting us know how quickly we will get it. But the data and the algorithm are the things that the humans at this point still sort of have control over and have an effect on whether the outcome is all of humans are dead or, all of humans are living a more leisurely life because of the insights that AI has brought us, right? Yeah. Or anywhere in between on that spectrum.
Leisurely life, that would be nice.
Don't you lead exactly that and have for the last 20 years?
For the most part, yeah.
But you're thinking about the people that don't lead that, the subsistence farmers, that it would be nice, right?
I just think for everyone it would be nice.
Yeah. But you've already got it. Why don't you tell us? Is it nice, Roy?
I would say you have a much more leisurely life than me, Jamie. Especially lately.
Let our listeners know. 1 out of every 3 messages I get from Roy these days is about how luxurious it is to just read by the pool. Oh, I'm laying poolside. Blah 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 blah.
I go to the pool for like half an hour a day. It's.
By the way, that when I was in Vegas, that was so much my life, but it is not anymore because we don't have the weather for that here.
Yeah.
Now I walk in the woods, Roy. It's different. It's still leisurely.
Yeah. Getting back to what you were saying about how one of the use cases for humanity is to go data collect and
to feed data to AIs.
I agree that is going to be an important role. I saw this tweet. I think it was a tweet or Twitter thread, or maybe it was a Substack entry letter by someone who was
you saw some content.
Piece of content. One of the top contributors to Stack Overflow. Basically Stack Overflow for the last 10, 15 years has been the single place that all programmers in the world would go if they had a problem. If they're like, I'm stuck, I don't know how to fix it.
You go to Google, by the way, and then Google brings you to the proper Stack Overflow.
You go and Google it and tell you where on Stack Overflow to go. Either someone else has had the same problem and solved it, and you just go and be like, hey, I can use this, or like slightly tweak it, or it's something relatively new and you write up your own situation, and then the community would come in and someone will usually help you try and troubleshoot. And this person had both asked like over 100, 200 questions and responded to a few hundred. And he said he's just stopped now because of ChatGPT. He doesn't go to Stack Overflow, he goes to ChatGPT. And a lot of people are rejoicing and being like, this is awesome. Just you get your answer way quicker. It's
right.
But then if no one's like, ChatGPT was trained on all this Stack Overflow data. Yes. So if there's no new data going in, are we actually going to improve? It's this really interesting thought.
Yeah, well, so again, that to me, the way I look at it is these 3 things, right? At that point, we can try and improve the algorithm some more. We can give it more computing power, but ultimately, one of the biggest things, and again, the differentiators to me are the data and the algorithm. Again, the computing power is just about speed of it. if we're not going to feed it novel new data, we're not going to necessarily continue to get interesting new insights, because we'll have had it already sort of make all the interesting inferences on the existing data sets soon enough, right? And so to get something new out of it, we'll need new data down there. Because also, and I'm far from an expert on this, although I was, interested in machine learning for many years now and dabbled in it, of course. There's sort of only so much you can do with the algorithms, right? You have lots of parameters. You can increase the parameter space and stuff like that. But ultimately, you just sort of have a lot of data and a lot of clever math to go from input to output, based on what you want your output to be. If we have extreme machine learning experts, I'd be very interested for them to sort of correct me on that. And my lack of understanding on the degree to which we can still make, sort of quantum leaps in the quality of the algorithms. But I don't actually think that's particularly feasible. It's very small and incremental at this point, is sort of my understanding.
Yeah, I'm not enough of an expert to really have much insight on that. But the other thought that came to mind was, robotic technology is pretty damn good. Like, will they need us to go out and data collect, or can they just...
No, eventually, largely no. But the idea sort of that I'm thinking is, not in the future, not necessarily no, but in terms of what we can do between now and then, and specifically what we can do between now and then to make that be a pleasant future versus a horrific future, involves, again, dealing with the data that we feed these things and dealing with the algorithm that we feed these things. Or, the futile thing that we laughed about last week, going like, well, let's not just give them the computer. Like, let's not do it. Let's put all of this stuff back in Pandora's box. But we both laugh because it's so laughable that that will happen. I did actually see a headline that sort of took it to another level about like NATO should bomb data centers to prevent. And it's like, again, it sounds so crazy, but when you talk to the people that know the most about AI or think they know the most about AI, there is a lot of very genuine concern about the degree to which it can get out of hand in a negative way in the future, where all of a sudden it doesn't sound that crazy. But also, if we just take a little bit of an interesting step back and think about just, the nice, pleasant warfare of the future between humanities and take AI out of it, it does seem like data centers are going to be a very great new target to do with your strategic bombing. That wasn't a thing to consider necessarily in previous wars, right? If you can take down Amazon Web Services entirely or whatever, those are very valuable targets in a terrible war scenario, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you could take down like Amazon, let's say for a month, that would kind of cripple so many Americans, people, not just Americans, but other countries that use Amazon.
Yeah, and also like legitimately, not just in the corporatocracy and blah 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 of it, but like the Pentagon itself and the U.S. government, they have contracts with cloud providers. They don't just do everything on their own cloud. So it gets right directly to the government itself, not just the entities that feed taxes into the government and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Just as a slightly related note, one thing that is very much talked about in theoretical wargaming these days is Taiwan making all of the high-end processors. TSMC is the company specifically that does so much of it, and there's a lot of thought and planning happening on the Chinese side and on the American side about how valuable. So that's the real world atoms side of the equation of what is a new valuable target in a present or future war, versus sort of the data side of it. But again, you're hitting the real world stuff that stores the data when we're talking about the data centers.
Yeah.
This is weird. It's an NFT podcast, and now we're talking about what are the strategic targets for bombing in World War III. But that's what's great about this podcast, right? Is we go on tangents and we talk about interesting things.
It's not like even that much of a tangent, because like AI is such a big topic, and this is very closely related to AI. I saw it would have been a tweet the other day.
A piece of content. That's
a piece of content. No, it was definitely a tweet. Einstein allegedly is famously known for having said
sticks and stones. I know that one.
I don't know with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. This tweet was like, I don't know what weapons GPT-5 will use, but GPT-6 will use sticks and stones.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Here's another thought while we're just sort of free associating about the interesting stuff of AI. I might have brought this up in the group chat, but I might have just talked about it to a couple individuals that are in it. I've sort of been of the opinion for a while now that the U.S.'s time on the top of the global order was vaguely numbered and that China was likely to overtake them. Still sort of believe that, but I am also considering now when we talk about this idea that I've been talking about a bit here where we go, data, algorithm, computing power. My feelings that the Chinese would surpass the United States was very much about sort of the sort of banal level of computing power or the equivalent of it in terms of economy and ability to wage war, right? But you do have that thing that the people that are more pro-American would argue about is the ideological differences, right? Which are obviously quite large. And I think also, at least to me, obviously, right, there's pros and cons to both. We don't need to get into that. It's interesting, but we're not going to get into it right now. But if you have this new huge technology, AI, right, that's based on all of this data, and you also have, in the case, for instance, of the Chinese government, this, the firewall and the degree of censorship that they sort of demand out of all of these providers. And then you're trying to have all of these, inferences that are, again, this is the new big technology that leads to winners and losers in the future, seemingly, right? If you have to have stuff that's just off limits down here, or somehow have the outputs over here be off limits because it crosses these sort of sensitive political lines, that does seem to be like something that could be a potentially huge issue for them in their ability to outcompete us in the future, and was something that, a year ago I was not even considering.
It's just fascinating. Like, the world is in a fascinating, this is a fascinating time to be alive. It's
That's on so many fronts. Always, right? It's just, it kind of accelerates and we have more information about it and all this stuff. But it doesn't detract from what you're saying, but it does seem like that's sort of always true, right? We're always in very potentially scary, but also exciting times.
Are you talking about like our generation, our lives, or like human history?
No, like all of history, basically. There's more to it once everything is connected and you're aware of everything that's happening, right? Because there was a long time when if you were on North or South America, you had no concept of what was going on, in, the Eurasian and African worlds. And likewise with Australia, right? They were also extremely separate. You had a lot of interaction between Europe, Asia, and Africa through basically all of recorded history. But they were distinctly separate. And the degree to which, China and Britain were interacting was microscopic, but now we can look back and see some interesting, Silk Road type stuff to where there was some information getting that far east and that far west. But yeah, I mean, now when we can sort of, in some sense, see everything that's happening everywhere all at once, which, by the way, good movie. I don't know if you saw it.
That, yeah.
I need to see it again, but it kind of makes it clearer the degree to which these are interesting and volatile times in a way that you couldn't before. The technology, obviously, right? It just moves so much quicker all the time in a way that makes, if you look at like every single generation of humans before, let's say, our grandparents, basically, the amount that they would change from generation to generation is considerably smaller, basically, than what we have been seeing for the last few generations, and seemingly will continue to into the future.
It seems to be like exponentially increasing as well, especially with AI.
That's sort of always been the theory about technology and computing power, is that because science builds on top of science, it does kind of become asymptotic in the degree to which it gets crazy.
Yeah. There's this great graph from Wait But Why. I don't know if you know the blog. It's really great. And basically it's like, basically asymptote. Like, it just goes da-da-da-da, and a man standing there is like human history and technology, and then just straight line up. And it's like, we are here. And it was like just before the big line up.
Right.
Yeah. We have other stuff that we ostensibly were wanting to talk about. Two things. I have 10 minutes left before I got to go. Do you want to get to them both?
What
we
do we have
being
here?
Indicted, and Jim is biking. We can probably chat about
both.
both.
Those are both not particularly related to this, so we can skip over both of them or talk about them briefly. I'm not particularly interested in doing either. If you only have 10 minutes, do you want to just get to like a game for a giveaway?
Yeah, let's do that.
By the way, I don't think I sent any NFTs for last week. I don't know if we got it.
I don't know if we picked winners. We'll
ask
Vito. He's
we're not scammers. We're not scammers. Just to let listeners know, if you entered, we will have winners and they will get NFTs. It's just occasionally it takes 9 days instead of 7 or something. But yeah, let's do another quiz or what am I thinking thing. Do you have anything ready?
I got another 6 Who Wants to Be a Zillionaire questions if you want to.
Okay, let's do that then. That was fun last time.
Yeah. All right. Let's go. Question number 1. Don't even need to ask this. Which of these is a popular platform for creating and trading NFTs? Open Window, Ocean View, Open Fridge, or OpenSea?
I'm going to go D, OpenSea.
Correct. Question number 2. Which EIP established the standards for NFTs on the Ethereum blockchain? EIP 20, EIP 1559, EIP 721, or EIP 998?
That's interesting. I'll say 721 just because I know the numbers associated with it in ERCs, but I don't know if it's correlated to the EIP.
721 is correct. We had these questions on the show today, and the person thought it was a trick question and guessed something other than 721.
Yeah, and the second one I knew was also the one about burning the fees and all that.
Yeah. All right. Question number 3. Who is the creator of the term metaverse? A, Mark Zuckerberg. B, Elon Musk. C, Neil Stephenson. Or D, Satoshi Nakamoto?
Neil Stephenson.
3 for 3.
I haven't read any of those. No, I have not. No.
Yeah, I've got it on.
It was on my list. I don't know if you remember this, like way back. This is going back almost earlier than we've ever talked about on the podcast. But on Bet the Pot, like one day I was like, it was after. Specifically, what had happened was I read Watchmen, and like the main villain of the comic inspired me. I was like, oh, I should like exercise and learn things, because his whole thing was he was sort of whatever. We're getting off topic, but I decided I needed to start reading, right? And I was like, hey, people, like, give me what are all of the good what should I read if I want to learn everything? Yeah. And somewhere in the list, basically, I was told that I needed to read Snow Crash.
I remember those lists.
and stuff.
One of the Guns, Germs, and Steel was a book that was constantly recommended there. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of, I hear there's a lot of like well thought out criticisms of the conclusions of his writing these days. Jared Diamond, by the way, is the name of that author, Guns, Germs, and Steel. Interesting thing to think about, even if it's been largely falsified these days.
All right. Question number 4. This is the one that I thought you definitely wouldn't know, but you can surprise me. Who is the creator of the collection Nakamigos? A, Migos Labs. B, Hypho Labs. C, Lava Labs. Or D, Naka Labs?
Okay, this is interesting. I did sort of just see this on like a trending list or whatever on a marketplace recently and went, I have no idea what that is. So I'll start there.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say is that I vaguely remember seeing something in the last, let's say, 3 months about a new Larva Labs thing. I don't know if it's true or if I'm imagining that. So I'm kind of tempted to guess them. Please read me my options again.
A was Migos Labs. B. Hypho Labs, C. Lava Labs, and D. Naka Labs, Naka.
I'm going to go with Larva Labs.
Unfortunately, that is not correct. There has been a lot of or at least there was a lot of speculation that it was.
That's what it was. It was speculation, not confirmed.
I didn't realize that it had been confirmed who it is. It's Hypho Labs, apparently, behind the Nakamiko's collection. Oh wow! So we usually get the questions going harder and harder. I'll give you the next two. 6 is going to be the easiest question in the world for you, but question 5 is, in which year was USDC?
Even though 6 is supposed to be the hardest?
Yes, for the average listener.
Okay.
But 5 is, in which year was USDC launched? 2012, 2017, 2018, 2020.
12, 17, 18, or 20?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I'm so fucking stupid. I can't even remember what year was the Bitcoin white paper to get a frame of reference for the start of all of this crypto insanity.
The white paper, I think, was released in December 2008, and then Bitcoin 2009.
8. Okay. And how quickly after that would have Ethereum come around? 12, 17, 18, 20. I'm leaning towards 12 or 17 because it feels like it's been around for a long time. But there's a
Ethereum
huge difference
in
between
2014.
Okay, so I'm going to not guess 12 then, I would think. All right, but also the fact that you're saying that makes me want to guess 18 or 20, but I'm going to say 2017 anyway.
2018 was the answer.
Yeah. I should have correctly inferred from you and used my poker skills like I was tempted to.
And then the last question, the hardest question of all. Who is the artist behind the collection Dragons? A. Zancan. B. William Mapan. C. Yazid. Or D. Ryan Bell.
As I talked about earlier in the podcast, that is a William Mapan collection on FX Hash.
Yeah.
Mapan, yeah.
I mean, yeah, questions 5 and 6, or at least 6, is generally a generative art question, and most people obviously have much less of an understanding of individual artists and their collections in generative art, especially if the collection is not even on ETH.
If it's not named Fidenza.
Yeah, or Squiggle maybe.
So what do you want to do as the password? Hypho Labs. Dragons maybe is easier or something.
Dragons. Let's do Dragons.
DRAGONS. No capitals.
Yep. And there'll be a link in the description below, and we'll randomly.
There'll be 2 winners, and each winner will get 1 NFT from me and 1 NFT from Roy on the Tezos blockchain.
That is correct.
It's been episode 73. Thanks for listening. Here's what I was thinking. It would be nice if this podcast became more successful. So let's just put another push out there. Please subscribe on Spotify and Apple podcasts, and please leave 5-star reviews.
Yeah,
easy enough.
Stuff helps. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. That would be nice. And be a good person, blah, blah, blah. Feed the AIs good data that will save us in the future. Go look at ants and tell the AIs about it.
Oh, boy.
Oh, shit. Thanks for listening.